Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Beau. Hope you guys are good today. It is Exodus 14 on the morning devotion. And man, I got to take down that soccer ball, right? This soccer ball, the World Cup is over. It is done. And so maybe I don't know. Where is it at? Which one is it? Oh, it's that one. Okay. Put it back. But the World Cup's over, and congrats to those Spain folk. That was quite a domination over Argentina, even though they only got one goal. I mean, so it's funny. Everybody says it was a domination. I guess it was a domination of possession, but you only got one goal. That's it. But that's soccer, right? Hey, hope you guys are doing good, Paula. So good seeing you and hearing from you this morning. Thanks for the encouragement. Enjoyed just worshiping with you guys and being there and open up the Bible and share some things and how it relates to my life. And it's a good passage in Ephesians, and that's what I was able to teach yesterday at the church. And that was cool. It's a prayer of Paul, so it was really neat to kind of break it down. But boy, what a beautiful passage. It really focuses us for sure. Okay, so we're going to continue our Through the Bible in Exodus 14 today, because let's get into it. Let's just roll right in. Beautiful day out, kind of nice. I was already out on a moto ride early this morning, and that was really nice. Beautiful sunrise, absolutely gorgeous. Okay, chapter 14, let's do it. It says, Then the Lord gave these instructions to Moses. Order the Israelites to turn back and camp by Pi-hahiroth between Migdal and the sea. Camp there along the shore across from Baal-Zephon. Then Pharaoh will think, the Israelites are confused. They are trapped in the wilderness. And once again I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after you. I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped there as they were told. Man, this is a really cool little paragraph, and because it answers a question too. It's a question like, why am I going through this? That might be the question, is why am I going through this? Moses could ask that question and probably did. Why are we doing this? It seems like it's not the correct direction to go to the land of Canaan. We're making a kind of a little bit of a turn here, and we're going into an area where it seems like we can get trapped. And it didn't make sense. And a lot of times that's how life is. It doesn't quite make sense. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to my parents? Why did this happen to this person? Those kind of questions. But here it answers it. It says, I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh. God has a way of displaying his glory, meaning his presence, his making himself aware, making his righteousness known, making him known. And it's in different ways. Sometimes God will have mercy on someone, and that display of mercy will show the amazing mercy of God. But it also might be his judgment, meaning there might be a judgment on someone, and that displays God's righteous judgment. And so God is going to do things according to his name and his glory. It's going to be for his glory. It's going to shine him in some way. So when something bad, what we call bad, happening, sometimes God is showing his glory in a particular way. And I know that's difficult, because sometimes we go, well, how is God's glory displayed in that? And it might not be very easy to kind of see. And I can grant that. But I think when we take a step back and we think through it, we'll see that there is some way that God is displaying some part of him, something of him in the situation. So let's see what happens here. It says, then the word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, and Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What have we done, letting all those Israelite slaves get away? They asked. So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot and called up his troops. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commander. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so he chased after the people of Israel, who had left with fist raised in defiance. So here we see that people are again being called the people of Israel. This is really starting to kind of settle in the narrative. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all of his horses and chariots, his charioteers, and his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they camped beside the shore near Pi-hahiroth, across from Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt?" And a lot of times when we are in a situation, a lot of times this is how we respond to the deity, so to speak. We criticize. If there is a God, why is he doing this? If there is a God, why is he doing that? If he is a God, where is he? If he that's how us humans tend to behave. There's reasons why we tend to behave that way, but it is interesting that we tend to blame God for practically everything. It's God's fault. It's God's fault. And I certainly was raised that way, where I tend to, if there was a God, man, I didn't like him. He didn't do things my way. And I mean, isn't that what life's about? God doing things my way? We tend to be selfish like that. We can't see it really well. We can't see our own selfishness, but that's how we act. That's how we're judging God, is if God is going to do things my way. If he does things my way, then man, I'm kind of cool with him. But if not, then there's all these questions. What are we doing? Why are we going here? Why didn't we do, Then we start ragging on God. It's almost a sign of sheer selfishness when we see that kind of blame taking place. And we've all seen this with someone who's super addicted to something, right? Where it's like they just blame. Oh, it's this, why? And we see that's kind of the affirmation of the problem, right? When you start blaming, it's an affirming of something's wrong, instead of just looking at yourself. I mean, look at you. I mean, you think you got it together? You think you got it all together? You think you're not selfish? Am I calling like, oh, God bless you? Am I calling God's blessing really just a selfishness, like a stroking of my selfishness? Like, man, gosh, I got 10 cars. God has blessed me immensely. It's like, or, hey, I got the biggest, house in the world. God is certainly blessed. Or God, I have 17, you could see the problem there, right? Okay, yeah. You could look at it one way, like God blessed, but is God, are we calling our selfishness God's blessing? And that's something, we have to kind of always step back and just say, hey, God, it's not like I am amazing, and that's, I gotta look at it like, man, God deserves to judge me. Like, God deserves, I deserve God's judgment. Let me put it that way. It's not like I deserve God's mercy. And I certainly don't want to get an attitude that my selfishness is something that God blesses. You know, the Israelites, I mean, they're going through a difficult time. They're, traveling. And traveling can be difficult. And then they're being chased, potentially going to get killed by the army of Egypt. And they're wondering, why is God doing what he's doing? So there's some good things for me to think about. Am I a selfish guy? Am I a guy am I okay with what God's doing in my life? And am I humble? Do I realize he needs to judge me? And that's okay. Am I okay with that? Or am I kind of overly selfish where I'm afraid for me to look at maybe my prayer life and say, God, am I really praying more selfishly? And instead of, understanding that you don't want to bless my selfishness, you want me to learn to be like Jesus. And you want me to be like your son, and you're transforming into the image of your son. And that means a giving, and not so much the getting, right? The selfishness of getting, but it's the giving, learning to give up, learning to lose my life, learning to give over my treasures, these kind of things. It's funny when you read missionary books on missionaries, man, you really get this idea of, understanding that they don't want God to bless their selfishness. They want to let go. They want to try to give their stuff, to people in need. I mean, it's really radical. It's beautiful. And it says, then the Lord said, why are you crying out to me? Oh, it says, but Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. I love that. The Lord's going to fight for you. Again, not fight for my selfishness. God's not going to be like, hey, right on. I'm glad you're selfish. But when we're in that trial, when we're in that difficulty of, potentially losing it all, right? As the Egyptians, the Lord's going to fight for you. The enemy's coming, the Lord's going to fight for you. That's a cool idea too, right? The enemy's coming, the Lord's going to fight for you. That the Lord's on your side. And when you know Christ, man, you know the Lord's on your side. I mean, he's opened up your eyes to Jesus. How beautiful is that? And then we start working on that selfishness part. Hey, God, what are you telling me to do? What are some things I can do to be more of a giver instead of more of the getter? Instead of being a consumer, maybe I can learn to be a distributor, Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. Pick up your staff and raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will charge in after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots and charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. So God's going to display his glory in his judgment of Pharaoh and his army, and people are going to know. They're going to go, wow, God really is God. So God works in ways where we go, God really is God. God can do what God's going to do. And he's got a reason. And he's got a purpose. And he's going to plan. But he's going to display it in a way where we're going to just sit back and go, yep, okay, we are inept. We are the ones that are impotent. We can't do it. But, God is mightier than us. And so it says, then the angel of God who had been leading the people of Israel moved to the rear of the camp. The pillar of cloud also moved from front and stood behind them. Isn't that cool? It moved from the front and stood behind them. Interesting. Definitely an interesting pillar of cloud, right? Very unique. Burning bush kind of ish. The cloud settled between the Egyptian and Israelite camps. As darkness fell, the cloud turned to fire. Again, burning bush-like. lighting up the night. But the Egyptians and Israelites did not approach each other all night. Man, that must have been radical. And then it says, then Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the Lord opened up a path through the water with a strong east wind. So there was a wind that blew, a strong east wind. And it says the wind blew all that night, turning the seabed into dry land. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground with walls of water on each side. Man, that is radical. Then the Egyptians, all of Pharaoh's horses, charioteers, chased them into the middle of the sea. But just before dawn, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw their forces into total confusion. He twisted their chariot wheels, making their chariots difficult to drive. Let's get out of here, away from the Israelites, the Egyptians shouted. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Have you ever, remember when you're riding your bicycle when you're a kid and like you bail and then you bend your rim? I don't know if you've ever done that before, where you bent your rim and then you get back on your bike and you try to ride it and it's just like, it's like so wobbly, and it's like, even though your tire's still pumped maybe, but your rim is bent and it's warped and it's just no longer, working well. I also think of an example of when you're playing basketball with a warped ball. Remember that when you're on the playground as a kid and somehow someone gives you a ball that's warped, it's kind of lopsided, and you bounce it and it's supposed to come up to your hand, but it bounces to the right or to the left. That's always funny too. And, because it's unpredictable. Well, here you have these wheels on the chariots that are like that. And, the Egyptians know something's amiss here. Something is wrong. And they have been told over and over again that the Lord is going to fight for the people of Israel, but Egypt doesn't believe it. They probably believe hey, our gods are made up. And so they probably think that, maybe the Israelites' gods made up as well. And, maybe they're thinking on that line. That it's not really miraculous. But everything about this event, by the way, sounds pretty miraculous. Water standing up on the right and on the left. The wind blowing so hard that it dries the ground. I mean, this all sounds pretty miraculous, pretty radical. It's interesting, too, that we get another picture of the deliverance of God when his judgment is on someone. Just as when God's judgment is on the world in the Noah's flood narrative, we see that there's a salvation for the people of God. When it comes to Sodom and Gomorrah, we see that when the special judgment is on Sodom and Gomorrah, there's a special deliverance for the people of God. And we see here, too, that just as there's a special judgment on the Egyptians and the army, I should say, of Egypt, there's a special deliverance for the people of God as well. Yeah, it's you see a pattern developing in the Bible, that when there's a special judgment of God, there's going to be a special deliverance of God's people. Very cool. And so it says, when all the Israelites had reached the other side, the Lord said to Moses, raise your hand over the sea again. Then the waters will rush back and cover the Egyptians and their chariots and charioteers. So as the sun began to rise, Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the water rushed back into its usual place. The Egyptians tried to escape, but the Lord swept them into the sea. Then the waters returned and covered all the chariots and charioteers, the entire army of Pharaoh. Of all the Egyptians who had chased the Israelites into the sea, not a single one survived. But the people of Israel had walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground, and the water stood up like a wall on both sides. That is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the seashore. When the people of Israel saw the mighty power of the Lord that it was unleashed on the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So even though the people of Israel complain at the beginning of the chapter, and they're like, man, dude, God's whack. Like, what is going on? Like, why would he do this? Why would he do that? This makes no sense. They're just like us, where we just go, it doesn't make sense. Why would God do this? Why doesn't God do this way? And why doesn't God do that way? That kind of thing. We get at the end of the chapter where there's a display of God's glory, to where there's a judgment of God on a particular group of people, and there's also a salvation, a mercy that's on a particular group of people. Notice that the people of Israel, it's not like they were really nice. They were actually mad at God. So it's not like they were the great ones and the Egyptians were the bad ones. It's not that. God, this is what we call election, meaning there is God makes decisions. God, and that is something I have to either be okay with, or what I'm saying is I want God to make decisions according to me. And today, am I going to be that way? That kind of selfishness. God's got to make decisions according to me. He's got to bless me. He's going to bless my selfishness. That's how I want God to act. I want God to act that way. I want God to bless my selfishness. That's what I want. Either we're going to want God to do what we want him to do, or we're going to have to be okay with God making the decisions that are God's. Now, when I think of this today, I also think, do I want other people in my life to make decisions, the ones they want to make, or do I want them to make the decisions I want them to make? Do I want them to make the decisions I want them to make, and do I want to control them? Is that going to make me happy? Is that going to make me feel good that they do exactly what I want them to do? Or do I really want to give people autonomy? Do I really want to give them the right? Do they really have a right as a human being to make the decision they want to make? And, in their, and I'm not, this isn't a great philosophical talk here. I'm not talking about every decision. I mean, don't say, well, Beau, they want to go murder. Should I let them murder? I'm not talking about that. Of course not. But just in their life, like your spouse or your kids, your older kids, let's say, or your friends, or, of course we want to give people their autonomy, that they have a relative amount of freedom to make decisions that they want to make. And if you want this, you can go there. If you want that, you can go there. You have decisions to make. Or would you rather, just be forced into every decision? This is what you got. And you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. And if you're a person who likes that freedom, then why would you get mad at God if God has the freedom to make decisions, right? If you like the freedom to do what you want to do, then wouldn't the deity, God, get to do what the deity wants to do? Of course. See, when we attack God and say, well, I'm mad that God's doing it this way, we're kind of walking in a contradiction, because we want to do things our way. And God is greater than us. And he's all-knowing. He's all-knowing, and he's righteous, and he's all-powerful. And God can do what is needed to do, and we can trust that his way is the right way because he's righteous. We certainly have shown that we're not very righteous at all. So for us to make decisions all the time, we know we're going to get it wrong at some point. But God never gets it wrong. He makes the right decision. And so those Israelites, even though they were barking at God, blah, 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 God had them on their mind. He made a covenant with their descendants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were in the covenant. They made a decision to do the Passover, to follow the Lord, and they were barking. And God said, man, I'm going to show myself to you strong. Sometimes that's how it is in our Christian life too. We're in the covenant with Jesus. We're there. We've applied the blood of Christ to our life, but we start barking. And God in his mercy displays himself to us in a radical way. Even amongst our complaining, he continues to love on us. He is faithful to his covenant. I'm so thankful for that. So it's a good reminder today just that God is faithful to his covenant, even when I'm acting like the Israelites. Okay, so we will talk to you guys later. Have a good Monday. Enjoy it, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon, okay? Bye-bye.